Welcome to NFL World with the NFL coach Jacob. And if my voice doesn't sound well, or if I sound a little stuffy, it's because I am very sick. So I'm trying to push through this as much as I can. That's why I didn't record a video yesterday. Let's recap Week 18. We'll get into the Black Monday firings of head coaches, and we'll get into the Matt Eberflus news at the end of this video. But let's recap what happened. Giants, they beat the Cowboys 34-17 in a game that I don't know what was going on. Dallas, they decided they were going to play their starters, and then they got halfway through, and they sat a lot of them. It was all over the place. But the Giants, they scored 34 points. You win this game. It was a great win by them. Jackson Dart was making play after play. There were incredible plays. There's a couple times I'm worried about Jackson because he doesn't slide and he's taking unnecessary hits. But I think he's taken care of himself more than he has, so that's good. And I thought the defense of the Giants played okay. Not great in the first half, but good in the second half. So in my book, that's okay. That okays during the game. It was a good win. The only negative for the Giants was the fact they won this game and then won the game last week against the Raiders. It took them out of the first overall pick and the second overall pick. It actually moves them to the fifth overall pick. In a class that only has two starting quarterbacks, really, that in the first round that you would say, oh yeah, boom, that's a no-brainer. Boom, that's a no-brainer. Which the Giants didn't need one, but they could have gotten a haul for trading back from the first overall pick. Even the second overall pick, they could have gotten a good haul from that. So it just wasn't meant to be, I guess. You fall to the fifth overall pick. You have to bring in some talent to help this team out. But I was impressed. They ran the ball very well. And Tyrone Tracy had his first 100-yard game in, I think they said 23 games in 2 years. That's crazy. That's insane. So congrats to him. But it was a good win. I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to keep Mike Kafka as the head coach. I would not be surprised if they do that. I wouldn't, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Moving on to the Lions at the Bears. We'll talk about the Cowboys in a little bit. We don't need to go into that discussion right now. Lions beating the Bears 19-16. Well, if you're the Bears fans, you can look at this and say there was a positive and there was a negative. There was two positives and two negatives. The positive is you didn't give up 50 points this time to the Lions. That's good. The negative is your offense didn't show up. Your offense didn't show up. Can't do that. Another positive was you held them to 19 points. That's a positive. Your defense had been an issue, especially against San Francisco. The negative, you didn't play the way you needed to play. You can't play these games like that. It's not good to your team. Now you're kind of going on a losing streak. You lost to San Francisco. You lost to Detroit. You didn't lose the second seed because the Eagles lost, and we'll get into that game in a minute. But you could have had to go against San Francisco again and then have to go on the road. Now, you're basically, if the first seeded Seahawks mess up, you have home field advantage through the playoffs. You're lucky, but you need to be better than the way you've been. That's the best way I can describe it. Moving on to the Raiders beating the Chiefs 14-12. Yeah, this was a game. Was not a good game. We'll talk about what the Raiders decided to do in a minute, but it was not a good game for sure. I did not like the game plan for either of these teams. I think the Chiefs were just looking for the season to end. Because at what point are you going to make a decision? You obviously knew the season had to end, but this was disappointing. This was very disappointing. You couldn't even beat the Raiders. That's how bad this got. And for the Raiders, it was disappointing, but you got the first overall pick. But if your decision is to draft a quarterback, then draft one. If your decision is to not, then trade back and try to get as much assets as you can. Whoever the coach is, because it's not going to be Pete Carroll, and we'll get into that a little bit later, you need to figure that plan out. You got to do it quickly. Moving on to the Patriots at the Dolphins. Patriots beating the Dolphins 38-10. This was no contest. They played the win. That's the way the Patriots play. And they beat the Dolphins at home. They made play after play after play. You did everything you needed to do. That's the best way I can describe it. You ran the ball well. You didn't turn the ball over that much. When you made some mistakes, your defense capitalized. You do everything you can do and you win the game. Patriots did that. They won. Plain and simple. Dolphins, I don't know where you go from here. I don't know if you can keep Anthony Weaver around when your team gives up 38. It's not great. Not great at all. Moving on to the Commanders and Eagles game. Commanders beating the Philadelphia Eagles 24-17. Josh Johnson won this game. Josh Johnson, when he's had to start, he's won this game for you. He does one game that you're like, whoa, what happened there? That was this game. And I know Lane Johnson wasn't playing. Saquon Barkley wasn't playing. But I don't get the play calling still. If you're going to make play calling decisions and you're not going to make the right ones in certain situations when your offense stalls out, it's a question. I don't care who's playing, if it's your backups, if it's your starters, whatever. If you can't make good decisions as an offense or as a defense, it's bad. Plain and simple. The Commanders, not going anyways, but it was a good win. You have to admit that. Moving on to the Broncos beating the Chargers 19-3. No offensive touchdowns in this game. One touchdown was a pick six. That was it. I don't know what I expected when you're not playing Justin Herbert and this offensive line is so bad. Like that's kind of what happened. Offensive line was terrible, and Trey Lance, at times he made some good plays. At times he made some head-scratching plays. That's Trey Lance. He's still very young. He hasn't played a lot of football. But at some point, you do have to ask yourself, how can the Chargers win a playoff game if they keep this offensive line and Herbert's getting hit every time? Because Trey Lance was running for his life. And he's a running quarterback. He's a better runner than he is passer. If Justin Herbert's a better passer than a runner, and he's running for his life too, it's not a good look. Look, your defense made plays. That's what you got to do. Not a great offensive performance, but it doesn't matter. You go play to win. You got the first seed in the AFC. So that's simple. Get it done. In terms of the best games, it would be Denver and Houston, and not Denver and New England. Because Denver and Houston, not a lot of points will be scored, but it would be a fun defensive game. And we might see that in the divisional round. I kind of hope we see that in the AFC Championship game, but it probably won't happen. Okay, let's talk about the 6 coaches that got fired on Black Monday. Started as Black Monday, guys get fired. Season went bad, they get fired. It's that simple. No, I'm not. I'm going to change it up a little bit. This year, I'm going to say who got fired and what that team should look for in the next head coach. Let's start off with the 2 teams that got rid of their coaches in the season. That was Brian Callahan of the Tennessee Titans, Brian Daboll of the New York Giants. Callahan, they kept him around oddly enough, and then you get into the season and it completely falls apart in the beginning, and they just fire him quickly because it didn't work. It did not work. It shows that you need more than just, you need to actually have a plan of what you're trying to do. Their offense is dreadful. Their defense, which was pretty good last year, not that good this year. You need to find something. If I'm the Titans, you have a young quarterback, get an offensive coach in there, but you got to build this team as much as you can go. Build this team. But I would bring in an offensive coach. I would bring in a guy who is very system-oriented. I would bring in a guy like Mike McCarthy. I think he would fit that place very well. I think he would fit Cam Ward very well. But you have to be willing to take some shots down the field, too. Nothing that Mike McCarthy is not willing to do, but there's not a lot of good offensive coaches around. Kevin Stefanski, who we'll get into in a little bit, might be a good choice for them, too. But I don't think he'll take that job. Moving on for the Giants, Brian Daboll. Look, he should have been fired last year. He wasn't. He was brought back. Quarterback situation was a disaster. The defense, I mean, how many games did they lose when they were up double-digit points in the fourth quarter and it completely falls apart and they lose? It happened over and over and over again on repeat. Then when they went to Jacksonville after the first couple bad games, he got hurt. And you had the one of Daboll, he's peeking in the medical tent to see if he's okay. He gets fined for that one. And then when he's running Jackson on these quarterback counter plays and Jackson's not protecting himself, he gets hurt. Then they lose that game to the Bears, which I believe was his last game. Like, they made that choice to fire. Who you bring in? I don't think it matters who you bring in. I think it matters who fits the team. To me, I think you bring in a defensive coach. That's what you got to lead with. You have Brian Burns, you have Thibodeau, you have Abdul Carter, you have Dexter Lawrence. Bring in a defensive coach who fits the team. Maybe a Steve Spagnuolo. Maybe you go a different way, but I would go defense. Again, like I could see them keeping Mike Kafka. I don't often go with defensive coaches with young quarterbacks, but that would be my route for them. For the Raiders, Pete Carroll, he was let go. Bad season, but I don't think it was just because of the bad season. This is a multi-year process. This is a 4 to 5 year reclamation project, and he's too old. He's 74. He's going to be 75. He's too old. Bring in a coach who has some energy. It doesn't matter if he's offense or defense. I would go like the Robert Saleh route. I think that fits. Maybe a Brian Flores route. Bring in a guy with some energy, some youthfulness, and try to build up that team. I named 2 defensive coaches because there's not a lot of offensive coaches around. I would say, boom, that's the guy. No, there's not a Brian. There's not how do I describe this? You're not going to have like a Ben Johnson type coach this year on the offensive side. So you just got to pick your best choice, which I think are defensive coaches this year. But I think the Raiders have a lot of issues, both on offense and on defense. You have a owner that meddles in Mark Davis. You can't do that. You need to bring in a coach who has a plan, but also is able to deal with the owner. And then you have a high-profile minority owner in Tom Brady that you have to deal with him too. I don't think Pete Carroll was fit for this task. This is a 5-6 year project, and neither side of the ball is good. So you have to fit this task. You have to be able to have the youthfulness of going multi-years and also bring in talent as much as you can along the way. Moving to the Cardinals, the firing of Jonathan Gannon needed to happen. It was dreadful. He was bad. You lost your 9 straight games. I think the last game they won was Dallas. Maybe I'm missing a game, but I think it was Dallas. It was dreadful. They were awful. They lost 9 straight. They can't really run the football. The offensive line was a disaster. Your defense, it was okay, but you can't lose that much and be in that bad of coaching decisions. It was bad. And I wasn't surprised he was gone. They haven't had a winning season since he's been there. You gotta make a move. They did. The Browns, Kevin Stefanski, fired after 2 losing seasons. This isn't on Kevin Stefanski. This roster is dreadful. You kept your general manager around. I don't know why. I don't know why you kept him around. I don't get it. You have the worst quarterback situation in the NFL. The worst one. Outside of Atlanta, those are the 2 worst quarterback situations. Because Deshaun Watson, it doesn't look like he can play anymore. And if he does, he just didn't fit with what Stefanski wanted to do. You couldn't run the football. Your offensive line was bad. Your defense was the best part of your team. And yet you wasted a great defense led by Myles Garrett, who had a career year and an all-time year. You wasted that because your offense couldn't do anything. Deshaun Watson didn't work. Joe Flacco this year didn't work. It didn't work. The offensive line was too bad. The Dylan Gabriel, the rookie, didn't work. I don't think he's very good, but it didn't work. Shooter Sanders, for whatever reason, Stefanski and him just didn't jive together for whatever reason. He looks like, okay, maybe a player in this league somewheres. But, like I said, he didn't jive with Stefanski. I don't think Stefanski wanted to pick him. I don't think he wanted that choice. I don't think he wanted that outcome. But it was a bad decision all around. I really do believe that. But Stefanski was put in a terrible situation. This is a bad roster on the offensive side of the ball. Bad quarterback situation. You have an owner who meddles. He just had to get out of there. I think Stefanski, he's going to be very valued because he's probably the best offense coach out there. So I think he'll be very much valued. And I think this will be his best spot. Because the surprise firing was Raheem Morris. Now, they fired the general manager too. After a really bad year. It got better at the end, but they were more playing for Raheem Morris. I was surprised he got fired. I was really surprised. The supposed thing that came out, the rumor that came out was Fontenot, who was the general manager, wanted to keep Raheem Morris, and that was the reason he was let go. It doesn't make any sense. To me, I think they just wanted to clean house and start over. And I think Morris will be a very valued defensive coordinator or even head coach, as he is getting head coaching interviews. But expect the Falcons to go after Kevin Stefanski because their team is really built. They have a good defense that I think it just needs some fine tuning, but it's got some good pieces. A good offense. You got to figure out this quarterback situation, which I blame on the general manager. You paid all this money for this quarterback in Kirk Cousins. You draft a quarterback in that same draft, in that upcoming draft, in the first round. So now you're already starting that. Kirk Cousins wasn't playing well. You put the rookie in. You didn't give him a whole lot of time to really do anything. And then you start this, I guess, second-year player now. And it didn't work. He gets hurt. You bring back Kirk Cousins. You say, oh, thank God we had him. It was not a good choice. That, to me, was a fireable offense from the get-go. That's why I think he was fired. But I would assume Raheem Morris is going to be a very coveted coaching candidate for either defensive coordinator or even a head coach. I think he is really good at what he does. Just depends where he goes. But I would assume the Falcons would go after Kevin Stefanski, as he fits more of what they would want to do anyway. And final news was Matt Eberflus news. Matt Eberflus fired this morning, which I think the reason the Cowboys did it was they wanted to get as much news as possible. I mean, you couldn't keep him around. You were dead last in every category except one. You were in the bottom 5 of every category except for one. And that was rushing yards per game, and you were 24. You were bad. You were bad at everything. At everything. You couldn't stop the run. You couldn't stop a pass. You were terrible on third down. You were terrible in the red zone. You couldn't get after the quarterback. You couldn't do anything. Is it all in that Eberflus? No. Players are included. But the coaching staff didn't adjust to the players. Players couldn't really adjust to the coaching staff. There was a lot going on here. When the reporters asked Matt Eberflus, knowing what you know now, and if you had the ability to do it over again and start the season anew, would you have changed anything? And he said no. That's what Matt Eberflus said. He said no. You can't say no. It was dreadful. It was dreadful. You had to go. And it's a shame on the Cowboys, too, because I know 4 coordinators in 4 years, but you basically, every time they do this, they just copy and paste coaching staffs. Every time. Dan Quinn, when he was at Atlanta, they copy and paste his coaching staff. Bang. Outside of the linebackers coach and Al Harris, who was the quarterbacks coach. They copy and paste it. Bang. It worked. Then they went to Washington. They did the same thing with Mike Zimmer. They basically took his Minnesota defensive coordinator, his Minnesota defensive guys, or his Cincinnati defensive guys, and they copy and pasted that to the Cowboys. Bang. Didn't work. They got rid of that, brought in Matt Eberflus, and his guys copy and pasted it from Chicago. Bang. It's right there. Didn't work. You have to bring in coaches. Why the offense worked, they brought in the great coaches. They brought in coaches that they said this will work. And then they gelled together. That's why the offense was so good. Defensively, you didn't do that. You just brought in a whole slew of people, and it didn't work. Outside of Aaron Whitecon, everyone had ties to Matt Eberflus. It didn't work. The linebackers were terrible. The corners were terrible. Your safeties were terrible. Your defensive line was probably the best thing, and it wasn't very good. But let me tell you something. I don't think the Joneses did a good job with building this defense. They have to do something. But to me, the best way you can do it is you start from the top. And you go, okay, who do we interview? Do what the Bears did. And they interviewed Ben Johnson. They interviewed like 20 people. I'm not saying do 20. I'm saying interview like good 10 people. All ups. They don't have to be a defensive coordinator. It could be a different guy, passing game coordinators, anything. But interview 4 people. If you're going to interview 4 people like you did this past time with the head coach, you interview 4 people. Flores, Schwartz, Morris, and let's see who else. Gannon. That's who I would do. If you're going to interview 4 people, Flores, Gannon, Schwartz, and Morris. If you're going to do that, then I'm okay. Because either one of those guys, I would say, okay, let's go. Either one, because then I'm like, okay, you interview the best 4 guys. I'm like, okay, we're actually going to be serious for once. But if you're not going to do that, and you want to interview a lot of people, interview like 8 to 10 guys. And then ask them questions. Be detailed. Ask them, how are we going to stop this? What are we going to do here? What are we going to do here? And see if they have the answer. And say, okay, how are you going to want to make adjustments? How are you going to want to do this? How are you going to do that? Do those things. Don't just say, well, we like this guy, so we're going to give him the job. It doesn't work. Be serious. Be serious. You want to be good? You be serious about it. You take the first step. You don't say, oh, we're doing this because it's cheap. You do it because this will work. This will work. That's what they got to do. Be serious. And all those 4 guys I mentioned, they all blitz. Something Matt Eberflus didn't do willingly. Let me know in the comments who you had winning this week, and who won, who was your big winner, and also what do you make from all these coaches being fired? Let me know in the comments. For NFL World, I'm Jacob Bieber. Out.